So for a 1940s slash 1950s vintage inspired eye makeup, the very first thing that I recommend doing is putting down some sort of a base. So I used a clear eyeshadow primer. If you do not have anything like that, if you use like your foundation or your concealer, just anything that's a little bit sticky, that's always going to help color stick a little bit better to your eye. Otherwise, sometimes you can't get eyeshadows to stay on as long. You may not be able to get like the full pigment out of them, or they might end up a little bit like too powdery, and that can be when you get fallout too, and it just doesn't have anything to stick to. So I recommend using some sort of primer on the eyelid if you have something, and then applying your eyeshadow over it. So the way that I always like to think of eyeshadows, very basically, and I think this is something that's helped me kind of when I was beginning with makeup, and also just like teaching actors and teaching other people how to do their makeup. For eye makeup, if you kind of break it down into like a really basic, like a 3-step kind of approach, that can make it a lot less scary for people that don't necessarily know as much about eye makeup. So I usually start with some sort of like neutral, like all over base color. If I am going for more of like a nude neutral look, which is what we're going to be doing here, since that's what's more appropriate for these time periods. And then I have a lighter color that goes under my brow bone, and then I do something a little bit darker, just like in the crease of my eye, so where your eye kind of folds in, that's the part that you want to shade a little bit. So in this time period, we're not necessarily trying to recreate crazy dark smoky eyes or anything like that, but again, you just have to think about what's period appropriate, but then what's also period appropriate on stage, right? So maybe they only took one color and they just blended it straight up onto their eye, but for some people, when they're on stage without that dimension, it might look a little bit off. So I usually still add in something a little bit dark, just so that way there is a little bit of dimension, the same way that we went around and we did everything on our face. To give our face dimension, you want to make sure that you do the same thing on your eyes as well. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a very neutral brown color, and I'm going to put that on both of my eyes. And then one eye will have eyeliner in one way and the other one will have it another way, and that's kind of the way that we're going to differentiate between like the 1940s and 1950s eye for this. So I'm just going to go ahead and just take kind of like a neutral brown, and then you can just apply this all over the eyelid. So this is just going to be on like just your eyelid part. And usually for stage 2, I feel like most of the time you're going to end up using matte eyeshadows. So I personally, in my real life, I like to wear shimmery colors a lot more. But for stage, again, like I've talked about before, a lot of times shimmer and glitter can come off as kind of like sweaty and oily, so you just want to make sure that you always have in the back of your head that you're doing something for stage if it is going to be something that's more theatrical. And so again, we're just going to do the same basic eyeshadow on each side, and then we'll have the eyeliner kind of differentiate between the 40s and the 50s. So I usually apply my eye makeup kind of messy when I first put it on, the same way that I do the rest of my face. So I always feel like, again, like I can apply it. However, it's all about how you go back and blend it. So I think a lot of time, people spend a lot of time trying to make things look really perfect when they first put it on. But what you have to remember is that you always are going to go back and blend. So if you spend so much time trying to perfect something small, you're just going to have to go back and do it again and again. So it's better to just kind of get the color on there than to worry about it being perfect right from the beginning. So the next step I like to do is I like to take my highlight color that goes under the eyebrow, and I do that next. And then I just kind of use like a fluffy brush to kind of blend everything together. And again, so this would work. It doesn't necessarily, you know, this doesn't have to just be for like time period makeup. This is just like a really easy way to teach someone a really quick basic eye look, because a lot of times for stage, that's all it is. You just need something on your face so that you look like you have eyes on stage. So that's really like all we're trying to do. Obviously, if it's for like film or like a photo shoot and people are going to be a lot closer, then you're probably going to do something that might be like a little bit more like exact or like period specific. But for the purposes of stage, a lot of times it's just getting something that is reminiscent of the time period while still making sure that the person looks attractive and looks right when they're on the stage. So at this point we have like our lighter color and we have a more neutral shade. I always like to go in and shade with something a little bit darker just to give like a little bit more definition. Isn't necessarily perfectly period appropriate, not necessarily, but it just kind of gives a better sort of like overall look in my opinion. So I'm just going to take like a slightly deeper brown color, and I usually use like a more rounded kind of eyeshadow brush for this to pack it in, but you could really use anything. I've seen people do this with their fingers. Whichever way you want to apply it, it totally works. And again, so when you're in the crease, it's sort of like when you're shading the rest of your face, right? You just want to put everything in to little circles. So everybody's eyes are going to be shaped a little bit differently. So the way that I apply this doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work the same way for you, right? So my eyes are pretty large, so I have a lot of space to go in and shade, but if your eyes aren't like that, the more you practice it, the more you're going to find that you're going to figure out what sort of shape of like eyeliner and shape of shadow looks better on your eyes. Okay, so at this point you kind of have all three colors, and this is when you need to go in and start blending everything. So I just kind of go back and forth between every color that I use, and I just go in and I kind of blend as I need to. So we're going to take like that first lid color and we can go in and blend that. And then again, you're just kind of going back and forth. It's like tiny circles, so you can use tiny circles to blend out your contour. You can use tiny circles to blend out your eyes. Pretty much like any part of makeup, you can use that for like anything. And then again, so I'm going to go back in with the brush, and I'm not putting anything more on this brush that I did the highlight with, but this is really going to help if you go back and forth to kind of blend that shadow out. So you can still get the dimension without it being a really harsh line, and I think that's something that in theater, we all have a really hard time with sometimes, where we want to leave really harsh lines because we feel like we need something to be seen from really far away, when in reality, as long as there's a really great like blended shadow, you're still going to see everything. So it can still be soft. You can have a blended line, and we don't have to have these like crazy harsh lines on our face in order for someone to see our face from a distance. And then a lot of times what happens too is under here can get a little bit dark. So I'll go in and I'll take whatever the highlight color is, and I'll kind of pick up any shadow that might have fallen there as well. And then you usually want to make your inner corner brighter too, because that's going to be really flattering on most people as well. So I'm going to go ahead and finish my other eye, and then we can move on to eyebrows and eyeliner.